get started, I would love for you to put in the chat your name and school or district or organization. We would love to get a sense of who's here today. So if you can put that in the chat, that would be great. For those of you that are new to the network, I just want to briefly set the stage for who we are and the purpose of our work together. At Colorado Youth for a Change, we address barriers to learning by providing individualized supports throughout pivotal stages of students' education journeys, and we envision an equitable education system where each student has access to the resources they need to maximize their own learning and growth. A key part of how we meet our mission is through our student re-engagement program, where we re-engage and re-enroll young people into high school. Young people leave school for many reasons, and many of them do not know or believe that they can return. So our team helps address the barriers that lead students to leave school and helps facilitate the access back into high school and provide support along the way. In 2014, we began the Colorado Reengagement Network in partnership with the Colorado Department of Education as a way to bring folks together from different communities and roles across the state to shed light on trends we're seeing in our schools and in the re-engagement field. It is a place to share out best practices and hear about creative solutions. So I'm really excited for you all to get a chance to hear from Geneva Wicke and Alexis Kincaid today. CYC has been a participant in the Denver Opportunity Youth Initiative for many years and recently became the backbone of the initiative. The next iteration of the initiative involves incorporating belonging, meaning, well-being, and purpose into our programming. And today we're going to get to learn more about those concepts. So I would, really like to welcome Geneva and eventually Alexis, who will join us in a little bit, to the Colorado Reengagement Network today. And Geneva Wicke is the Director of Belonging, Meaning, Wellbeing, and Purpose at Aspen Institute and is a citizen of the Yurok Nation of Northern California and brings extensive experience in social change to the Aspen Institute's Forum for Community Solutions. Having held leadership roles in philanthropy, education, and the tribal government. Previously, the Deputy Executive Director of the Yurok Tribe, Geneva founded and led a community-designed early college high school and served as the Executive Director of the Wild Rivers Community Foundation. Most recently, a Senior Program Manager at the California Endowment, Geneva was responsible for leading a statewide investment strategy to advance Native American health and racial equity. In that role, Geneva worked closely with the Opportunity Youth Forum as a funding partner and was engaged with the Del Norte and Tribal Lands Opportunity Youth Collaborative, resulting in improved education, work, and leadership pathways for youth and young adults in rural tribal California. Geneva will be demonstrating an empathy interview for us today with Alexis Kincaid, who will join us shortly. And Alexis was an AmeriCorps member in CYC's Corporate Change program and joined our staff as a re-engagement specialist and is now a program coordinator for the Corporate Change program. Alexis brings a lot of empathy, passion, and an equity lens to her work with our students and AmeriCorps members. I'm excited to have you both here today. And thank you so much, Geneva, and I will pass it over to you.
Thank you, Mary. Thank you for that warm welcome and that very long introduction.
Well, it's so impressive. I wanted everyone to know your time.
Thanks. Thank you. And hello to everyone, even though I can't see you. I'm delighted to be here today. I do have some slides, so I'll do a quick screen share and hope that I've got it. Oh gosh. Okay. Oops. Okay. Are you looking at a slide deck?
We can see it.
Okay, great. And I will play from the start. Okay. So thank you for this wonderful invitation. And let me just run through like the purpose and intention of this, of our time together, which is really is to explore how might an improved sense of belonging improve outcomes for youth and young adults in your work. And so our outcomes and our process is really, as Mary said, to introduce these core concepts and examples of belonging, meaning, and purpose, and then to demonstrate design thinking tools. So we're going to actually practice an empathy interview, and I'll share a framework that might be as an offering and an invitation to you and your team and your work to think about how you might increase that sense of belonging, really to improve impact for youth and young adults. And so Mary mentioned I work for the Aspen Institute and our Opportunity Youth Forum, of which Denver is one of over 40 community collaboratives across the nation. And I should also share part of the network includes a group of over 40 funders and philanthropy, including, large national funders as well as local and regional funders. And I was part of this network as a funder working with the California Endowment, as Mary shared in my introduction. So I come from the Yurok Nation in very rural Northern California, which is one of the Opportunity Youth sites. So I just wanted to give a really quick background and context, and we're not going to go into this in depth around how did we get to belonging, meaning, well-being, and purpose.
Geneva,
Yeah.
I'm going to interrupt for a second. Your
Please.
screen share isn't going through your presentation.
Okay.
It's kind of showing your maybe bigger screen.
Oh, interesting.
About to run it.
Interesting. Yes, I see what happened there. Somehow it's anyway, it doesn't matter what's happening. Let me what I'm looking at is beautiful.
Yeah.
Let me do it.
It looks nice too, but
it is so good. What I am seeing is so wonderful. So let me share that instead. How about that? Do you see a session intent?
I see, yes, but I also see next slide, but that might be my presenter view as well. So let me get a co-host too. Julia or Vanessa, can you confirm?
Are you seeing a map now?
We can see the map, but we can see like the next slide also. So it looks
interesting. And so now I can't see the next slide. Oh gosh. Okay.
I mean, this view works too. I mean, I don't think
okay.
Yeah.
But what's interesting is I can't see it. That's okay. We'll just keep going. Apologies. If anybody knows how to fix that, drop it in the chat and we can I can try to fix it. I have three, if it's helpful, I have 3 screens going. So I'm sure that's a problem on my end. So let me just give a quick background around how did we get to belonging, meaning, well-being, and purpose. So this work really comes from and builds off of the learnings of 10 years of the Opportunity Youth Network. And I didn't mention, but I think most folks know the Opportunity Youth Network, it aims to address the 16 to 24-year-olds who are disconnected from school or work. And we have some really big thought leaders in addition to the work on the ground in community. We work with John Powell at the Othering and Belonging Institute around the idea of targeted universalism, healing-centered youth engagement with Sean Jenwright, and then the life course framework with Arnold Chandler. And so I'm going to run through this very quickly just to introduce some concepts, and then we'll get into the good stuff. So just to name it for folks who aren't familiar, targeted universalism is just this idea that we're going to set a universal goal. So like in Dilnor, we said we want all young people to leave high school prepared for college or school or career. And then we looked at, okay, who's not meeting that goal, then deeply listened and tried to understand what the structures that were either supporting or impeding the groups who were not achieving that shared goal, and then implemented targeted strategies. It's another way to also say, this is how we're going to get to racial equity, especially in communities where maybe the concepts of racial equity or those conversations are not, we're not able to have them directly, but we're still able to achieve those goals by saying, we're all in this together. We all have a shared vision of where we want to go, and this is about all of us. And then healing-centered youth engagement with Sean Jenwright is also about the idea is that trauma and well-being are functions of the environments, the structures, and the systems where people live, work, and play. And so healing is culturally grounded and about the restoration of identity, that it's asset-driven, focusing on the well-being that we want. So when we say belonging, meaning, well-being, and purpose, we're casting this imagination of what it is that we want, rather than saying like, this is about youth prevention or, what we don't want. And that really great healing-centered youth engagement also supports adult providers in their own healing. And so I'm going to jump into definitions and concepts and give quick examples from our network, just so we're all on the level setting about what we mean by these terms. For belonging, we have this definition of belonging from the Othering and Belonging Institute with John Powell's work. And so belonging to us is not just like fitting in, but it's actually belonging means having a voice and the opportunity to participate in the design of the political and social and cultural structures that impact people's lives. So that's the right to both contribute and to make demands. And these terms like belonging, meaning, and well-being, it can feel kind of squishy, but I just want to share that this sits on a large body of research and evidence, and numerous studies demonstrate that a strong sense of belonging improves education and workforce and health and resiliency outcomes. And our example from our network is Amarillo Community College in Texas. This is President Dr. Russell Lowry Hart. He centered love as the through line for the mission of their community college. And in just 5 years, they were able to triple their college completion rates. Meaning making is the second concept, and this one is a little bit trickier, so I'll take a quick second to talk it through. This definition is from Arnold Chandler, who has done a lot of work on Life Course Framework, and some of you may have participated in some of the learning series that we've hosted over the last few years. Meaning making interventions are different than like skill-based interventions, but these are really focused on improving the identity-related meaning that young people apply to themselves and the context that they're living in. So a lot of us are familiar with the idea of like stereotype threat, right? So like, for example, women in STEM might show up to class and feel like, oh, I don't belong here. Women, the engineering department is not created to be supportive of a woman in this field. And so the idea, and like just one concrete example of a meaning-making intervention that has been studied and tested in multiple contexts over multiple years is one in which young people in the beginning of their first year of college receive messages and hear stories from other young people who look like them, who are further along in their college journey, and about how they felt uncomfortable when they first started school. They didn't know if they belonged there. It was such a steep learning curve, and then things that those young people did to be successful, including going to professors' office hours and joining a club. And in that sort of seemingly quick intervention, what they found was the young people who had that kind of intervention that normalized feeling uncomfortable, that gave some concrete ways to overcome those feelings, that it actually had a positive snowball effect that had long-term impacts on not just they not only did their grades improve, like that first term was their completion of their first year more significant or more positive, but that snowball effect led to long-term change, and even decades later where they saw improved not only education and income, but also like happiness and health outcomes for those people with that kind of short intervention. And there's a huge body of research around these kinds of meaning-making interventions. An example in our Opportunity Youth Network is Project Butterfly out of New Orleans, which has a rites of passage program for girls of African descent transitioning from girlhood to adulthood that really places value on the positive attributes and values of their culture. The next definition is purpose. And we borrow our definition of purpose from the Whole Health Institute and our partners at the Alice Walton Foundation. And it's what really truly matters in the long run, what is important. And we've been working with Anthony Burrow, a professor at Cornell University, who was recently on a Hidden Brain episode of that Hidden Brain podcast for anyone who's interested. And he talks about purpose as forward-looking directionality. So it's your intention to do something in the world. So it's different than a goal, which can be accomplished. And again, this might feel squishy, but it also sits on a huge body of research that demonstrates that purposeful people actually tend to live longer, are less sick. And I have his quote here because I think it's cute, that the findings are mind-blowing about the potential impact on people's lives when there's a sense of purpose. And our purpose example comes from our partners in Hawaii, who have replaced their youth incarceration system with a Native Hawaiian restorative system that empowers communities. And they actually have no girls incarcerated, in addition to winning lots of awards. And then the last definition, and we'll get to some good stuff, is well-being. And this definition was actually created by a group of youth, young adult researchers through our partnership with the Annie Casey Foundation and Johns Hopkins University, which is that well-being is the journey to achieve balance in everyday life. So it's juggling school and work and family and friends and wants and needs and financial constraints. But well-being is a consideration towards being at peace with those multiple pressures. I also appreciate that the young people named that well-being includes a recognition of intergenerational and individual trauma from racism, and that recognizing that that is actually at the root cause of the lack of well-being. Oops. And so these are the themes that came. So there were 7 core themes that came from this young adult research project. And you can see that our young people self-identified in affinity groups of Latinx, American Indian and Alaska Native and Black expressions. And so the 7 core themes include healthy environment, cultural connections, financial stability, inclusion and safety, community self-efficacy, healthy relationships, and mental health. But you can see that there are nuances. So those various colors of purple and blue represent the kinds of differences within each of those themes that are represented by each of those groups or their own definitions. And about to come will be a well-being measurement tool that young people can use in their own community to do an assessment of where the well-being is showing up or where it's not showing up. This project, the initial report of this project just was published, and I have a link at the end of this slide deck for folks who want to dig in more. So I want to pause here and encourage folks to use the chat and just pause and ask for you, when have you felt a moment of true belonging? People could just put a note in the chat. When I'm at family gatherings. Oh, when I met my biological family 3 years ago. Beautiful. Others? Okay. Yep. Oh, in my work and with my colleagues. Oh, Julia. When I'm with my group of friends doing something we all love. Beautiful. With my students. Oh, hooray. In my military experiences, family, and now serving kids. Great. Keep them coming. And let me just share, this is a picture of me and my family the morning after a night-long ceremony. This is on the Yurok Reservation at the village of Requoy. So that's the Klamath River spilling into the Pacific Ocean in the heart of the redwood forest in very northern California. And This is where my people have lived since the beginning of time. And we held a girls' coming of age ceremony for one of our younger cousins. And this is absolutely a moment of belonging. This was a couple months ago. My yoga studio, at Earth Day Festival, time with my siblings, any space where everyone truly is collaborating. There are different points in my life and work family. Beautiful. And so as you think about that moment of belonging, how does belonging feel? I have some words here: comfortable, able to contribute. I would love to hear how belonging feels to you in your body. Feels like home. Calm and confident. Belonging feels like relief, centered, warm fuzzies, acceptance, absence of anxiety. Oh, like I can breathe properly, safety and unmasked, safe and secure, calm, a break from anxiety. Beautiful. Thank you for that. Yeah, keep them coming. Nourishment. Beautiful. Okay, so next we're going to jump into a hands-on practice. And in an email in preparation for this time, you received a journey map template, which I'll go into in a quick second. So if you've got that, grab it. And if you don't have it, we can make a quick sketch quickly. And we are going to apply human-centered design thinking work to our to this framework that I'm offering today. And so I just want to give a quick overview of some of the core principles, and also just to say, like, we are dipping our toe, we are scratching the surface. In no way is this, we could get a master's degree in human-centered design. But to say these are skills, tools, capacities that we use, approaches that we used in the Del Norte and Tribal Lands community when we were really working hard to change systems and policies to improve outcomes for young people. And we found that this was a way for us to really do like those principles of targeted universalism, which was to say, how can we deeply understand the lived experience of the young people who are not achieving the big goal that we have for everyone in a way that is not about us, but it's really about those young people, and especially young people who are having a different lived experience than we might be, even though they are our neighbors. And so here's a few principles. So one is we're going to practice empathy and not sympathy. And for those who are not like Brene Brown folks, empathy is really about putting ourselves in someone else's shoes. And sympathy is when we sort of, feel sorry for other people, or we are reflective of their feelings, but we're not actually deeply feeling them. And so today we call this an empathy interview because we're really trying to walk in that person's shoes. We're also going to be curious. So we're going to go into this conversation with Alexis really dumb, and we're going to come out smart. And we're going to use some improv skills, which includes yes and. So we want this to be a really generative conversation, which includes number 3. We're going to check our own ego at the door, and we're going to really center Alexis. And the framework that I'm about to offer is really an invitation for you to practice some self-reflection on your own work that you do, the experience that you've designed for young people, you and your team. And for us practitioners, it can be really easy to get defensive, right? Especially when we put our heart and soul into our work, and to say, but I offered that beautiful workshop and no one came, or I've got that service every week and you're not here, or whatever it is. And so this is about us just checking that at the door and just deeply listening to the human and the young person. Okay. And so let me run through a quick, especially for those of us who need to know that this again is based on good research. We are going to use the framework around do, use, think, feel, and belong. And I just want to reiterate that again, this work also sits on a large body of research about human behavior. And so when we consider what people are thinking, we're thinking about the cognitive domain. So the folklore, those stories, the motivations, perceptions. We're going to think about what people do. So what's Alexis in this story? What activities, what modes, what processes? What is she using? So is it Facebook or TikTok? Is it texting? Is there policies or regulations? What are people feeling? So fears and hopes and attachments, and then how people belong. So those social domains of culture and partnerships and community. This comes from our colleagues at Think Place, which is a human-centered design consultancy. And I use this one actually from our friends in New Zealand, which is where my husband's from. So you'll see a word like whakapapa in the how people belong, which is your lineage, your connection to your family. The intergenerational piece. Okay, so this is the framework that we're going to use. This is what I call a journey map. So we are going to map Alexis's experience of her year of AmeriCorps. Thank you again, Alexis. And I'll just walk through this really quickly. And just to say again, this is an offering to you and your team to be reflective in your own practice. And this can be applied to something as short as a 20-minute meeting with an advisor, all the way to like the experience of, a job training or re-engagement program to, a 4-year or a 10-year degree process. So there's a few, and this is obviously a very simplified framework to say there's an awareness. So how did you first hear about this opportunity? What was the invitation like? How did you enter? What was the onboarding like? What was the experience itself? And the experience could also include like what happened when there was dissent. How do you do repair if there was harm caused? And then the exiting, the goodbye, the finish, and then what was the long-term impact? And then here down the left is the do, use, think, feel, belong, which we just ran through. So as Alexis and I engage in this conversation, and we listened to her story. My invitation to you is to use this framework to really take notes and to listen deeply. And we often in Del Norte and tribal lands community will say like, listen like your life depends on it. Because that's what we're talking about here, right? Like our intention is to think about how we might improve the sense of belonging in our work to improve the lives of the young people that we deeply, deeply serve. And so listen as if those lives depend on it, because it really, really does, as you all know from your work. And so I'm going to stop. Hopefully I'll figure out how to stop sharing my screen. And what is happening now? I'm still sharing. And invite Alexis up. I did it. Alexis, hello, good to see you. Thank you again for making time and for being willing to share your story. And for everyone else on the call, Alexis and I got to meet ahead of time to prepare this conversation. And when we do this kind of work in community, especially if we were going to have a series of conversations with young people or others for this kind of work, we would set up additional kind of safety protocols. Including making sure that we could have this conversation be as confidential as possible. I would have wiped Alexis's name off of anything. And we already shared like this is not that, right? So you are here all on this call. And we do ask like for all the other participants, to hold this conversation in confidence. In the sense that Alexis is going to be open, and also we recognize that this is, there's lots of folks here. And so this, in normal times, we would have additional protocols in place. So this is really a practice for all of our learning. And Alexis, thank you. Welcome.
Thank you.
How are you feeling today?
Good. Excited to do
Good.
this.
Good. Me too. So Alexis, as I've already shared, you're going to share the story of your year in AmeriCorps. And before we get started, can you just like do the setup? Like, where were you in your life? What was happening? How old were you? Where did you live? And what was even sort of, making you consider different options at that moment?
Yeah, I had just finished up with school, and I was in the middle of applying. I wasn't entirely sure what I wanted to do. I knew I wanted to do service of some sort, and be in the nonprofit world. I was considering Peace Corps, but just couldn't make that commitment to the 2 years. And so I found out what AmeriCorps was, and that it was similar to Peace Corps, but more domestic and a shorter term. And I actually this was in 2018, and I was 21. And I was thinking of moving states because I just was like, oh, like time to grow from my parents. I want to move to a different state possibly. And was in the middle of applying to Vista positions in Texas. But then I got an email from, I believe it was like LinkedIn, or I want to say Indeed, and then just encouraging me to apply, or this position popped up for engagement support member. I think at the time it was called attendance support member with Colorado Youth for a Change. And I read the description, and it was just exactly what I was interested in doing. It was within education. At that moment, I had just been on a service trip not too long ago before this, and I was in Austin, Texas, and doing work with education there, and how it related to gentrification. And so this just seemed like it followed in line to what I was wanting to do, and using that experience. And yeah, so once I found Colorado Youth for a Change, and then I interviewed for the position, and then, yeah, I started in August. There was a few bumps in the road at the beginning that I went through, but it all ended up working out.
Yeah. And can we just pause real quick and
Yeah.
like dig into that? So you get something from LinkedIn or Indeed, and so you're going through both like the federal portal for the official AmeriCorps piece, and then how did you know about the actual organization that you'd be working with?
Yeah, so I looked on the website for Colorado Youth for a Change a little bit more, and I looked at their mission statement, their other programs. At the time, we did have a school, Future School. So I looked into what that school, the work that they were doing, and the students that they served, and just really tried to research as much as possible Colorado Youth for a Change and the work that they were doing.
And what was your impression?
I was just so happy right away to find somewhere where their values laid out and it aligned with me. Like I said, I just wrapped up with school, and I learned all this new vocabulary. So I was excited to see, like, it applied in the real world, and to see that vocabulary in their values and in their mission statement. So I was just really excited to find somewhere that it seems like on paper, it aligned exactly with what I was wanting to do and with my values.
Beautiful. So you felt some values alignment, you saw some shared vocabulary. So felt like this might be a spot that could be aligned. And then you applied, and then you said that there were some bumps in the road. Can you share more about that?
Yes. So I was not born in the United States, but I have been a US citizen for, I believe at that time, it had to have been at least 10 years. So for a while, and there was just some bureaucratic and like out of Colorado Youth for a Change, it was more AmeriCorps as a whole, just running into having to fill out additional forms because of my citizenship status, and just having to like prove that I was a US citizen. So there was just an additional form, which kind of pushed it back my start time during orientation.
And so then so you get through that, and orientation starts, and tell us about that process.
Yeah. And during that whole time, like, I was thankful that at the time, Vanessa and Elena were the program coordinators there, and they were able to just really be transparent during that time. I was a little worried that, maybe I wasn't going to be able to start, or this was going to stop me from starting. But again, they were very transparent through it all, and just walked me through it, and was really reassuring that I would still be able to start. Made sure that I was caught up when orientation happened, so I didn't feel too far behind. Like, I knew everything that had gone on the first and second day of orientation. And yeah, so once I started orientation, I was just very excited that it was all happening, and it just felt like I had finally found my community of people. Before that, I had went to Colorado State University, and it was a predominantly white college. And then before that, my high school was predominantly white. And so coming to Colorado Youth for a Change, it just felt like I had finally found a community where it was diverse, people that shared my values, that I didn't have to go on paragraph arguments on Facebook with, or anything like that. And it was just really very exciting. Yeah, to find people that understood the language that I was speaking and that we were all on the same page and speaking the same language.
Beautiful. And then as you started, what were you imagining your experience would be like?
Yeah, I think I was open to it all. I don't think I went in with too much expectations. I wasn't entirely sure what to expect. I think the position description was very broad at the beginning of what I would be doing. I knew I was going into a school that I was going to be supporting students with attendance. But definitely during orientation, I would say a lot of our focus was on learning about identities, learning about possible student barriers that they'd be facing and obstacles. So I think that my expectations, I wasn't too sure what to go on when I was going to my site directly related to my role. I just knew that during orientation, I did unlearn and learn a lot before going in there and about our students and the students that we would be serving.
Beautiful. And then you started at your site. Okay. And can you tell us how did that go?
Yeah, I was very, very nervous when I started at my site. I had never been within a school to that capacity. But the school that I was serving at, which was Florence Crittenton High School in Denver, Colorado, they serve parenting and young youth that are pregnant. And yeah, they were very, very welcoming. They gave me a tour of the school. Everyone knew who I was by the first week. It was a very small community school, and they were just very, very tight knit there. And they welcomed me in with open arms, which was really a relief. I wasn't sure what to expect. I was really thankful that I was at a smaller school. I think that helped a lot, that I knew everyone's name and every staff person's name like within the first week. And so that really just helped me feel welcomed, and then also combat a little bit of imposter syndrome. Definitely at the beginning, I was like, do I know what I'm doing? Should I be working with students right now? I don't even have experience like working one-on-one with students and having one-on-one meetings. Like, what does this look like? But I would definitely say my site supervisor at the time, and then also my supervisor, just really my CYC supervisor, were really able to support me and then combat a lot of that imposter syndrome that I was facing. During orientation, we went over what imposter syndrome was, and I think just naming it and being able to identify it just really helped me and like helped me process like those moments where I was like, do I know what I'm doing? And just being able to identify that it was imposter syndrome and just having that reassurance, and then also being provided some tools to like, how our first meeting should look when we're first starting off. What are some icebreakers with students? And it really helped that we had the tools available, but wasn't a strict like structure that we had to follow. I was really allowed to get creative and find my way of relationship building with students, but with the additional help and support of others.
So you had tools, but you also had some autonomy to apply them in the place. And then you would also been sort of preemptively shared what some of the like potential feelings, like the imposter syndrome piece, and like had those named. So then you had some reference point to come back to, it sounds like. Can you share one of your favorite stories of your time?
Yes. Yeah. I would say one of my favorite stories was me really first learning about boundaries and saying no. Being in this role, I was just very excited to be within the school, and I was a new person and I was younger. I was 21 at the time. And some of the students at the school were even 20, almost 21. And so I think just being younger, I was just like willing to say yes to everything. I just wanted to make a great impression. I wanted to be available for everyone, doing everything. And with our role and Core for a Change, it's very flexible of like what fits under the position description and like what we can do to help schools. We try really hard to meet schools where they're at. And so with that, I think that like lines can be blurred, and I definitely blurred a lot of those lines at the beginning, just being that person that says yes to everything. And so, yeah, I just really needed to learn what boundaries were, because I definitely started to feel myself burning out in the middle of the year of my service term. I could just feel my energy starting to go lower, and I was doing things that wasn't necessarily what I signed up to do. And so with the help of my supervisor and having that conversation with her and just being honest and transparent with her, she was able to help me set those boundaries and give me the encouragement, and ask me what I would need from her to set those boundaries if it was a conversation with my CYC supervisor and my site supervisor, to sit down all together and have that conversation about my position and lay out exactly what my role is and what I should be doing. And so, yeah, she just really encouraged me to be willing to advocate for myself and willing to actually say no. And that story, I just always hold it true. And like, that's a story that I think impacted the rest of my year. I don't know if I would have continued on with the work because I was really feeling burnt out. And I don't know if I would be able, like, I think it went into my personal life too, of learning how to say no and set those boundaries. Like, that was a real moment in time where I really learned like how important boundaries are and that it's okay to have boundaries.
Yeah, which I think life lesson, right? For everyone, that's huge. I know we could go into so much more, and we are, and we're bumping up against time. So can you tell us about how did your experience end?
Yeah, so ending with corporate change, I would say I was very sad to be going into the real world. I think with CYC, I was just so thankful that I got that experience right out of school because, like I said, I found somewhere where I was aligned with my values. I never felt uncomfortable. I felt welcomed. There was never a moment where someone said something and I was like, oh, that's not sitting with me right. I did constant learning throughout it. And so I think there was just fear of like, oh my gosh, I'm going now outside of my bubble, outside of my comfort, outside of somewhere where I do feel belonged, and possibly going to apply to places where that might not be the same case. But I will say that like that year, like this outside of boundaries, I think it just set up my expectations of a workplace and my expectations of what to look for at a workplace, making sure, that wherever I landed, really that I was treated as a human first and not like just a worker, that I was a human being in this workplace, not someone that was just like replaceable and, just leaving personal life outside and being able to come into work and go into work mode. Like, I really set me up to make sure that that was something that I continued to look for throughout time. And that even applies now. So.
That's beautiful. Thank you. Thank you for that. And is there anything about your story that you wished I would have asked, or that is sitting on your heart that you feel is important to share as we close out our conversation?
No, nothing really. I think, yeah, just what I was ending with. Like, I really was grateful to find Colorado Youth for Change right out of school and experience that. And yeah, like I said, really finding that my voice is important, and being able to name that. So
Beautiful. Yay. Alexis, thank you so much. Thank you for sharing your story and for taking time. And thank you to I know you've got some of your former colleagues and current colleagues on the call. And so I'm thankful to them for creating that experience too. So we now want to open it up to a conversation, and we've got some questions for consideration that I will pop in the chat, but I can also do pull up the slide too. But just to say, like, for folks on the call, was there a clear moment of belonging that you heard in that story that you want to just name that stood out to you? Yep, she found a place that used her shared language and she saw those shared values. Yep. And I appreciated that she named it both like on the website and then in orientation and then throughout the conversations with folks. Values. Yep. And I don't know if the Colorado Youth for Change folks want to hop on. Feel free. Everyone knew her name within a week at her site. Yep. That was great. Yeah. And one-to-one outreach when things didn't go as planned during outboarding. Yep. And that she felt like even though she didn't get to start at orientation on that first day or the first couple of days, that she felt like she was included and kept it up to date, and that they reiterated, like, this is not your fault. Yeah, a supervisor who recognized burnout and help her set boundaries and not just to be a worker bee. Yeah, that's huge. Any others? Mary, did you have any that you wanted to name?
No, I think these are all, sort of what was popping out for me. And also, obviously for me, that third point in your thing of like, check your ego, right? It's like in the good and the bad, right?
Yeah.
Check your ego so you're not feeling bad, but check your ego because you're like, oh gosh, I'm so glad Alexis had this experience
Yeah.
with us, so trying to check my ego and not chime in too much.
That's great. And then what questions is this raising for you all in your work, in your practice as leaders, in your organizations? What questions is this raising for you? I had a lot of questions about what was happening with federal AmeriCorps, why there was a hiccup, but what other questions is this raising for you? How to give my students a sense of belonging. Yep. Just thinking about the through line of belonging and that it starts even before you talk to folks sometimes. Yep. Like what's on my website. How to really think through each step of the journey. How to address concerns when students may not have that sense of belonging in different spaces within education. Yep. Yep. There's a Stanford Design School has a book called Designing for Belonging, Susie Wise. And she also talks about, like, in addition to this framework, she also talks about like there are levers, right? And it can include like the physical environment. So are there signs that say welcome in multiple languages? Are there people reflected in the art or in the stories that are told or put up? We can think of like all those different kinds, the lingo that we use. Is it all acronyms that only we know? The songs that are played, like the food that is served, like we can go on and on, right, about the different ways in which the physical environment or other levers allow for people to feel that sense of belonging or not. Yeah, how to create belonging for people who don't have shared experiences or values with me. Yeah, then how to give voice and listen. Yep. And then my last question is, how might these ideas translate to like one or two like concrete next steps that you could undertake for your program, your system, or your work? Any concrete next steps? Work on active listening skills to really listen to what students are saying. Be intentional with time and onboarding. Mary, do you want to share about your connection to this work?
Well, I was just thinking of your last question, how really for us, we are in our reinvigoration of the Denver Opportunity Youth Initiative, and how can we use this framework even for creating this belonging in our network, in our initiative amongst the different systems that are a part of it. So education and K-12 education and higher ed education, and how can we use these principles to create that, so then that trickles down to the belonging that they're creating within their systems for students.
Yep. Beautiful. And then one question that we didn't have up here was just if anybody has anything that they feel like is really working for them in this space, an approach that you've taken, something that stands out for you that you've gotten feedback around that has really enhanced or supported a sense of belonging, meaning, or well-being in your work that you'd like to share. And there's a lot of expertise and wisdom on this call. affinity spaces for AmeriCorps members. Yep, and I think affinity spaces is one that often can be really helpful. Yeah, keep them coming if you've got them. Okay, I'm going to try to share my screen one more time. Building self-awareness around how I show up in space. Yep. Yeah, I like to Sean Jenwright's point. Oh, and again, I don't mean to be a Brene Brown promoter, but Sean Jenwright also was recently on a Brene Brown podcast where he really talks about the piece around how important healing, adult healing is in youth engagement work, and holding that mirror up to ourselves and making sure that we're in a good, grounded, healing, healthy space as well. And that's front and center of our minds as at Aspen as we're rolling out this work. Establishing and maintaining safe spaces for student sharing. Yeah. Yeah. And like I said, Alexis and I already talked about how we set up some parameters around this conversation, but if this was, not for, public learning process, that I would have additional safe space to create, especially like that confidentiality. So she could be really honest and authentic. Yeah, that's really essential. Thank you for that. Okay. Are you looking at a set of resources? A list?
We are.
What do you
still,
see?
It's still kind of that not right phase.
I know I'm scared to hit. I
think you could hit it and
see what happens.
Yeah.
Now what are you seeing?
The same thing, but you're probably opening another screen somewhere.
I'm sorry. Okay. Well,
yeah.
Okay. So here's a set of resources, and we'll make sure that folks get this, but links to Project Butterfly, like our partners, as well as some of these, bigger resources. The Meaning Making Intervention website actually has like scripts, curricula, lesson plans, those sorts of things for folks. And then the Wellbeing Project, the young adult driven well-being definitions and project, is at the Aspen Institute Forum for Community Solutions. My email is also here. And then in our last 5 minutes, I would love to keep the chat going, which I can't see at the moment, to get any other last questions, thoughts, feedback. And then I would also love to get your feedback. So this is just a QR code. So if you have your phone handy, if you can just hold it up and hit the little button, it's a very quick feedback form, but it's also one more opportunity for you to give us your questions and feedback. And any other thoughts you have on this work.
Thank you all so much, Geneva. I feel like
it's
such a big topic, and for 1 hour, super hard to get it all across. And I feel like you chunked it out in a really concrete way that hopefully folks, felt some connection to. And it looks like for sure that happened in the chat. And
great.
Yeah, if you all have any other, ways that you're already doing this or other questions, feel free to put those in the chat or the Q&A as we have this last few minutes. But I think it was a really powerful way to set the stage for sure. And thank you, Alexis. You're welcome.
Yes.
Pop back in too and show your face for being willing to share today.
Thank you all for asking me. That was great. So
Thanks,
thank you.
Alexis.
Yeah. And Mary, I can't see the chat. I lost the chat. I'm sorry.
Oh.
Wait, is there, I'm just double checking. Is there anything else that folks have? Any other questions or?
It's a lot of thank yous happening in the chat. Thanks for your great facilitation skills, Geneva. This was an amazing webinar. Thank you. Thank you. We'll send just a note that we'll send all of this out to anyone that participated. So you'll have the resources, lots of thank yous. So yeah.
Great. Wonderful. Okay.
Thanks,
Thank you
everyone.
so much. Okay.
Yeah.